people are just starting to come in now. So welcome everybody. Great to have you here. We have 109 people signed up for today, but as you know, we tend to get a lower number than that actually coming in. So I'll give it a few minutes just to allow people to come in. We're up to 20. Adrienne, welcome. Tracy, how are you? It's great to have you with us today. The original germ of the idea for this was actually to look at specifically the impact of the Biden administration. But as we got talking last week, it became very clear that there are so many large issues that face the mobility industry right now. We thought we would broaden it out. So I am delighted to welcome our panel, starting with Steve Quine, President and CEO of the Canadian Employee Relocation Council. Steve, thank you again for being with us. And Ronald Cam, Relocation Online, thank you again for being with us. Alistair Murray, EuRA board member. Alistair, always great to see you. And Gordon Kerr, EuRA strategic consultant for all things legal. Great to see you. And of course, last but by no means least, our moderator for today, Peggy Love, who is EuRA strategic consultant for intellectual content. So I will just say we have the Q&A box open, we have the chat box open. If you hover your mouse across the bottom of the screen, you can open those in Zoom. And please feel free to put a question in. Our panelists will be talking on different matters at different times. So if you've got something you'd like to ask a specific person, just put it in the chat box or in the Q&A, and I will wait for a good time to interrupt and to put that question across. We will also have some time at the end, so feel free to put things in the Q&A. If for any reason we don't get round to a specific question, then obviously Peggy will remind you at the end that you're very welcome to contact our speakers direct. But in the meantime, all it remains for me to do is put my microphone in mute and say thank you very much. Peggy, over to you, star moderator.
Thank you, Dom, and welcome everyone. As Dom said, we started out with this idea to just be talking about the US presidential election, and we started talking about it before the results of the election. So, and then when we got together with this panel, this great panel last week, just to talk about the format and the information that we wanted to convey, we realized, whoa, we can't just talk about one thing. I mean, everything just sort of intersects. So Biden, Brexit, COVID, IT, all of these issues came up, and we realized that we did need to broaden this. So as Dom said, I'm just sort of repeating what he said. That's how this this briefing sort of got started. So let me just quickly say thank you to this brilliant panel. These are familiar faces to all of you, I know, and we want them to have a dynamic conversation. Again, we found that through some of these briefings, it's really, for me, it's more fun, and I think it's more interesting for all of you, especially with this topic that's so sort of broad with different aspects, that a conversation, I mean, all of us are friends. These guys all know each other. So I think I hope you'll get a lot out of the conversation that we want this to be. So, and please bear in mind, these are opinions only. So we'd like for you to sort of view this as EuRA's year-end op-ed. So having said that, I'm going to start with Gordon. And Gordon, can you just please give us your best perspective on kind of where we are right now, a little more than a month after the US presidential election in the United States, and also how, like I said earlier, how that event, how that election intersects, the impact of that intersects with the other important issues of the day that are affecting all of us. And so Gordon, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. I've just been working on an article for the European, for EuRA's magazine, and I felt there were three big events would be impacting on the relocation industry next year. Two of them are absolutely huge ones from a European perspective, and that, of course, is the COVID pandemic and Brexit. But let me start with the third event, and then we'll follow that trail into the others. As we all know, in January, Joe Biden will replace Donald Trump in the White House. The expectation in Europe is that the USA will soon be working, I guess you could say, more harmoniously with its traditional allies, and re-engaging with international bodies like the World Trade Organization, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, that kind of thing. Now, from a purely UK perspective, it's actually, you could describe this as mixed news. Donald Trump was a supporter of Brexit and had promised Britain an early trade deal, a US-UK trade deal. Joe Biden, by contrast, is anti-Brexit. And I actually just picked up, and I'm going to quote this because it's in the New York Times a few days ago. Joe Biden was asked about trade deals, and this is what he said. We're going to invest in America first. Now, who does that sound like? That's Joe Biden. I'm not going to enter any new trade agreement with anybody until we've made major investments here at home and in our workers. Also, Biden's of Irish descent and has already spoken about his concerns relating to the Irish border and the impact of Brexit on that. Now, if we take we zoom out a little bit into the European Union perspective, certainly European Union is very happy about Joe Biden replacing President Trump. Though even here, there are some individual countries that are not so happy, particularly I'd say Hungary, Poland, Slovenia, where you've got populist leaders who may feel they're losing an ally in Donald Trump. And we actually had the wonderful situation of the Slovenian Prime Minister writing to congratulate President Trump on winning the election, which was possibly a mistake. But it gives you some indication that it's not just one European Union view here. Looking beyond Europe, it looks as if President Biden will actually take a similar view to Donald Trump on China and fairly an aggressive approach. The tariffs that have been put in place, there's no suggestion that they will be removed. So actually, in terms of China and the impact of that on global trade, and I'm sure that Steve will have more to say about this, but just picking up that point that, you know, it's too easy to make a contrast here and say Donald Trump was going in that direction and Joe Biden will be going in the opposite direction. I don't think that it's more nuanced, I would say, than that. So overall, there will certainly be differences. We will have a president who is more international in outlook, a president who will be closer to the EU, but I think equally aggressive on China. And it's for that reason, I think the other two issues in terms of linking this into the relocation industry are probably more important for relocation companies. Obviously, we now have the cheering prospect of a COVID vaccine. And unless something unexpected happens, which is always possible, national economies and individual businesses should be in recovery mode, at least by next summer. But I mean, I feel that the pandemic is already changing our industry, and you know, we're almost being accelerated into the future. Things that have been put in place for the pandemic, it seems to me, will be of real relevance going forward. And many businesses which might have been planning to, you know, move faster in a digital sense over 3 years, it seems to me that they've actually been doing that over the last 6 months, in part being forced to do it. And so it will be interesting to see how our industry moves now in terms of our approach to services, our approach to marketing. Will we go back, or will we be taking a far more digital an online approach to these things. And I guess my colleagues in the panel will be able to say more about that than I could. And then thirdly, we have Brexit. Now, I'd hoped today, after a certain dinner that took place in Brussels last night, that I'd be able to say something more specific. And just as every time I've said to Dom, and we've been having a session that, yeah, definitely by such and such a date, we'll know where we stand on Brexit. I've been wrong again, and the latest deadline is now Sunday. And but don't hold your breaths on that. If there's no deal, the UK economy will take a serious hit, as will the Irish economy to quite a strong extent as well. And looking right across the European Union, the hit will be significant, if perhaps less than the UK. And you know, there were figures in today's Times on Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, in terms of the projected hit to their gross domestic product. And the figures are pretty ugly, coming on the back of the impact of COVID. So I think that is going to have a huge impact on business activity in Europe. It will certainly be better if a deal can be done. But right now, there are probably more negative noises than positive ones. So that is a real concern. Now, there are some positives for the relocation industry arising out of that. If you're an immigration firm, the fact that there will now be no freedom of movement between the UK and the European Union, and all these people will be needing immigration assistance with visas, I guess is one aspect of that. Immigration firms should be doing quite well out of that. And also right down to individual DSPs in some cities, which I think at the moment look like being beneficiaries of Brexit, because jobs maybe that were traditionally in the financial centre in London that are now moving to Luxembourg, Amsterdam, Paris, Brussels, Frankfurt, Dublin. Not in huge numbers, but there is definitely some movement there. For the UK, there will be new hurdles to doing business in Europe, and for individuals on a personal basis, we now face more hassles when we're traveling in Europe, from the need for travel insurance, driving licenses, car insurance, taking my dog with me, you know, just a whole range of things that used to be automatic that are now, we now need to think about and get documentation in place from the 1st of January. Final point from me in terms of this big picture, there's also the risk, particularly if there's no deal, of this hastening the potential disintegration of the UK nation state. There is a real possibility, if there's no deal, then voices that are shouting for Scottish independence will be heard louder, and more people will be listening to them in Scotland. And the calls for a united Ireland within the EU, I think, will get stronger too. So, yeah, that all sounded a bit negative, apart from the COVID vaccine. But yeah, I think we really have some challenges ahead in Europe. And I think let's get a different perspective. I'm going to pass over to Steve, who will look at things perhaps from more of a North American perspective on things.
Thank you, Gordon.
Thanks, Gordon. And thank you for including me in this discussion. The uncertainty around Brexit continues, and you know, the implications of that on business are, as you said, they're going to be profound. Let me start on a positive note, if I may. I always like to look at things with a little bit more optimism, and maybe that's, you know, the thing that one of the things that we've learned perhaps through 2020 is that what keeps us buoyed and above that, you know, out of that lake of despair is hope and optimism that tomorrow is going to be better. And you know, during this terribly destabilizing, upending time, we've had some very encouraging and heartening news over the past few weeks. I think the political climate in the United States bodes well for greater prosperity on a global level. Although there will be wins against that, I do think that America is going to, as you said, Gordon, come back into many of the organizations that it departed from during the Trump era, and I think that's good for harmonization of trade and other opportunities between countries. And I think the second, you know, the greatest piece of news I think that we're all cheering is that the beginning of the end of the COVID virus is in sight. I don't want to be too optimistic, you know, I don't want to be overly optimistic, but you know, it's the best news that we've seen since what, March the 3rd, I would say. But you know, how do we prepare for the next normal, and what does that next normal look like? China certainly is, from a trade perspective, the elephant in the room, but it has motivations to engage in trade negotiations and looking at ways to remove barriers to trade. 16% of China's GDP is linked to its export market, and you know, the Chinese recovery, together with India, are probably in the range, currently are being forecasted in the range for India around 8% growth in GDP and 16% in China. So you can't say, I understand the point that, you know, the US government is saying, you know, we're going to focus internally. You can't discount that market that's growing so rapidly, and business won't do that. In terms of globalization, I think that we could probably say that we've hit the peak of globalization when it comes to durable goods, the movement, the shipment of goods. But when you look at the fact that about 70% of the modern economies, the more mature economies like Europe and North America, when you consider that about 70% of their GDP is in services. Now, why is that important to mobility? Because we move people that innovate and create. So the people that most, you know, certainly in Canada, and I will say, I will assume it's the same in Europe and the UK, is that most of those people that are working for your clients are employed in financial services, research, technology, healthcare services. Those areas of the economy are going to continue to grow. They're going to be vitally important in this economic recovery from COVID. And I think that paints a very optimistic future for the relocation, the mobility industry. Will it be the same? No. Will people require different services? Yes. Will some companies in the industry fail or not get through this? Absolutely. Will there be new companies that emerge from this? Yes. This crisis will drive innovation. I think we talked about that last time. New online solutions and new ways of adapting to the new realities that we have. I would agree that digitalization, the speed at which we have adapted to this new reality has been incredible. I can say from some of our members, you know, large financial institutions, they had a 3-year plan for perhaps allowing certain areas of the bank to work remotely. Well, on March the 13th, they pulled the plug and everybody was working remotely. Productivity has increased in many of those organizations, and it's not likely that many of those organizations will be back into a bricks and mortar environment for a long time to come, if ever. We're seeing some companies like Shopify and Google that are putting in place permanent work from anywhere arrangements, which again, I think creates a significant opportunity for our industry. How do we support, regulate, work from anywhere arrangements? Gordon, you speak a lot about data protection and privacy. We've done things together speaking about duty of care. All of those things now come into the mix, and they're far more strategically important than they were before the pandemic. So, yeah, I think that's my message: is that amidst all this confusion, uncertainty, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not another train in the tunnel coming towards us. I think that's a very encouraging reality. And I think we're going to see this rapid digitalization continue to roll down the track, using the metaphor of the train. I think we're going to see that continue to be adapted very quickly by business. And that, as I said, that creates new opportunities. Now, on my very, very final note of good news is that although Britain and the EU have been negotiating for 4 years now, 3 years for the Brexit exit, Canada and the UK met for a dinner last week, and now there's a trade agreement that's being put before the House of Parliament here in Canada and in the UK, and it's fully expected that we'll have that deal signed before our houses convene for the Christmas break. So I'll leave it on that. I'll leave it on that note. And I touched on a few things about mobility, and maybe Alistair, Ronald, you can pick up on that piece of it in terms of how you foresee some of those implications for the service partners in the mobility industry, particularly from a North American perspective.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve, and thank you everybody for allowing me to join in on this. Yeah, I'm going to try to sort of look at the more practical side of things per Peggy's sort of comment around what's the impact here on maybe specifically U.S. providers, although I do think that some of the comments will extend to any of our members in any location. Oftentimes politics and trade, particularly trade policies, are at such a macro level that it's not always clear how impactful it is immediately for us as service providers. I think what drives mobility is obviously a healthy economic climate, and an immigration framework that allows the free movement of people. While both of these have been impacted, first and foremost, of course, due to COVID, forget the immigration part, we just couldn't move for some time. Although immigration specifically in the United States was impacted on top of the impacts of COVID. There were two really impactful things that happened. In June, Trump signed an executive order essentially suspending any entry of the major business visa categories into the United States. And in October, the Department of Homeland Security added a ruling that significantly increased the minimum salary requirements for the H-1B visa. The H-1B is sort of the equivalent elsewhere in the world would be the highly skilled migrant visa. That's impactful because obviously suspending entry means nobody gets in. So that was a double whammy on top of the fact that we were having trouble moving people because of the pandemic. And then that salary requirement would make it incredibly difficult to hire entry-level to mid-level employees, and therefore would have an impact on the numbers. The good news is that the executive order will actually run out by the end of the month, and that the ruling was just struck down last week by a court in California. There is, however, another ruling in the making that is going to be wage and salary based, and so then we need to look at, okay, well, what does the Biden presidency have in store? And there are a lot of sort of points typically when a U.S. president comes into office for what they call their first 100 days. There are 15 items on the immigration policy there, and there is some reference to some wage-based scenarios, but it's not entirely clear whether or not a new ruling would be overturned very quickly. I think that goes back a little bit to Gordon's points earlier, that Biden too has struck a very focused effort on, we need to recover America, as every country is doing currently, right? We're all suffering from the impacts of COVID. So the same is sort of true with trade. It wasn't necessarily clear there was a trade policy over the last 4 years. It was, starting trade wars by Twitter, and that has not been positive for our mostly, I guess, as American consumers. I know this for sure. Because my duck confit that I had for Thanksgiving was a lot more expensive than previous years. And it's not that I don't like turkey, by the way, but I don't know what to do with 10 pounds of turkey just with my wife, because of course we didn't have a big party to celebrate. So I think the good news is that if these rulings are either going away and the new one is not as restrictive, that at least that would open up the main visas that we need here in the US. And I'm beginning to hear some signals that that's happening, but at the same time, like I said, there's a little bit of uncertainty. Not surprising from the technology guy on the panel, digitization has been put on steroids. I will make actually a few comments that contradict this a little bit, because I think there's two things that we need to do better as an industry. It's what the technology does that we need to focus on. I think there's still way too much focus on sort of the operational back office aspects of how we manage relocation and how we track things, particularly now that we're not in an office together anymore and we need to do this remotely. And that's good because those systems are helpful and likely will help with efficiency as well. But I think we need to focus way more on what is the assignee experience like. How do we look into the future now that clearly things have changed in terms of how people are moving, the support they might be getting, because we're all under pressure again now of reducing cost because companies are trying to recover from COVID. And one aspect there I would say is we need to figure out how to get out of email. If we do everything what we do with technology, but our email is our main communication mechanism, we're not really making a lot of progress. And it remains the weakest link in the entire data privacy and security aspects as well. So I think we have a lot of opportunities there, and so as an industry, I think we need to can do better and should do better on that front. The other point that I would make is, if anything has been proven over these last, say, 8 months, is that DSPs are really the unsung heroes of relocation. Mm-hmm. No matter how much tech you throw at all these problems, DSPs have really come to the rescue of the assignees. And I don't care how tech savvy one is, dealing with the constant changes on the ground and being able there to lend an empathetic ear to the assignee who's more stressed out than ever trying to figure all this out, I think isn't recognized enough. And I would link that into something that Stephen, you said around some of the newer models and kits that are coming into the market. I think they are better able at capturing the attention of particularly mobility buyers. And I think as an industry, we can do better to talk about the values that we have and talk about what we really offer. And I think we need to pick up on this. And maybe there's an opportunity, by the way, I'm going to put Dom on the spot for EuRA to, improve our voice, because I think individual DSPs don't have a strong voice because they often have, long-standing relationships with big customers and don't get particularly in front of the corporate buyers. But I think we can do better there and should be proud of what we offer. And I think, again, these last 8 months have proven that very decisively. And so there's opportunity for us to pick up on that. And I think maybe there's some ideas that we can share in the second part of the conversation. So Alistair, over to you from your perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Ronald. That's probably the perfect warm-up. If you say DSPs are the unsung heroes of mobility, then you've got my attention immediately. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I think the aim of this conversation is to talk about three monumental changes, but also, as Steve said, to try and keep it positive and optimistic and upbeat. And for me, it is a particularly difficult time in the UK, as Gordon alluded to, and what's happening or going to happen in 3 weeks' time, frankly, is terrifying. But to keep it positive and to keep it optimistic, I think the thing that I'll remember the most about 2020 in terms of our industry is, as others have said, the speed of change and the fact that I do believe sometimes we aren't the most innovative industry in the world, obviously with the exception of Ronald, but there are a lot of us out there, and I've definitely been guilty of this myself in the past, of thinking actually our service delivery is okay as it is because we're winning new clients, we're receiving great signing satisfaction scores, our clients love us and we seem to be doing well, so actually maybe email and PDF attachments are okay. And I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. So 3 or 4 years ago, thinking, do we need to take a serious look at kind of reinventing the wheel if the way we're managing services works already? And then I think a lot of us were maybe 2 or 3 years ago suddenly realized actually we do need to have a technology solution, but none of us, or very few of us, were actually sure what that should do or what it should achieve, and what we were trying to achieve. So a conversation, and we had this in the EuRA board meetings, we had it at various conferences where people were talking around investing in a new system and the different options available in the industry, but no one was really sure, and it felt like a gamble. Which of the 3 horses or 4 horses were you going to put your money on? And it's a huge amount of money and it's a huge amount of time, and no one was really too sure. And I think the thing that has changed this year is we've been forced to innovate as an industry. We've had no choice. So we now, I think, have a clearer picture of what it is that we need to achieve in terms of automation and a technology solution, because the questions that were unavoidable when people were saying to us, well, actually, I want to land in my new country and move straight into an apartment. I don't feel safe going to a service department or temporary accommodation. So not always, but that's one thing that signees were saying. Plus, as you mentioned, Ronald, just the sheer volume of information that all of our assignees required on a daily basis is like nothing we've ever experienced before. I think you have so many questions moving to a new country anyway, but then you're doing that in the middle of a pandemic. There's so much more information you need, and so you're absolutely right. It was the guys on the front line, almost, the ones that are speaking to assignees who were facing this deluge of emails and telephone calls like they've never experienced before. And I remember one of our guys at RSS saying, this is not new, it's not a new phenomenon, but he was saying would regularly on the phone and assignee would want to talk, sometimes for hours, because they just wanted to ask as many questions as possible. All they could see as the conversation was continuing was just email after email after email coming into his inbox saying, asking a similar type of question. So it's nothing our industry has ever experienced before, and that has definitely focused the mind on how we're going to solve that problem and remain relevant and have a sustainable business model, really, because The other thing to consider, I think that Gordon mentioned, we have been providing a VIP service, a very hand-holding, high-touch service to everybody living at home, because that's more than ever what they require. It's just if that becomes sustainable, that's what clients expect in 2 or 3 years' time. And how does that work? Because we could be faced with a situation where our guys are actually only able to manage half the number of files they could do previously because of that amount of information that they are providing. And so, and I don't know, that's not a bad thing in any way. Speaking to a signee for hours on the phone or answering as many emails as possible, that's what we do. That's what we get paid to do. It's just looking at ways of trying to automate some of that and to take away the administrative burden to allow those conversations to happen, rather than saying, well, I don't want to talk to you on the phone, I'll send you a text message. I think it's looking at the other way. So to your point, Ronald, and I know you and I have had this conversation at many EuRA conferences over the years, and we're thinking of, the industry is thinking of how things change on the front end and how assignees can find information for themselves. And also, just by running a sustainable business, we need to think about how we can take away some of the administrative burden and data entry. And we finally need to have a conversation and get APIs in place with our clients. And we've talked about it a long time. And I know there's been a sort of a level of frustration in how we work. But like I say, we have no choice now. This has to happen, and quite quickly. So that's the positive I will take really from the year, that we've been put in a position where there's been some amazing innovative solutions provided by people. And I think lots of businesses, most businesses will have changed permanently. The services that we are now providing, the virtual services, the extra level of care, that will continue. Hopefully when we're in a position where the vast majority of people have been vaccinated and everyone can fly again, and the world is back to normal, some of those services will still apply. There still will be a virtual home finding service that people will be interested in taking up. Because I think we've seen these things happening already. It's just the speed of change is accelerating. I've been aware of a telecommunications company that we worked with for 10, 15 years, and the number of assignees that we get initiated on month on month and year on year is going down. But that doesn't mean they're moving fewer people. It means that there are different assignee populations who are being managed in a different way. And some are being left to their own devices, but some are being given a technology solution to help them find information in their new country. So these things are already happening. It's just, like I say, it's been a way of focusing the mind. So there aren't, in general, there aren't too many positives from 2020, particularly if you live in the UK and you're facing a Brexit shambles, as you can read about on Twitter. But that's, for me, that's the one. It's the speed of change and the need for innovation. I think it's been particularly positive this year. So that's my take from a DSP perspective.
Well, can I just pop in right now and say, all of you have really made me think, and you've hit so many nails right on the head. And to me, I think, I just want to throw this out. It all comes back to the speed of change, as you said, and the innovation and the things that DSPs and all of us in the industry are so good at. But who are we dealing with? We're dealing with people. And, and I think Alistair, in another conversation, we were discussing how many people are, the fact about people getting on the phone, that assignees who just want to talk. I mean, I don't know how all the rest of you are, but, just on a personal level, I'm in touch with so many people from my past, from, even the present, having lots more interaction, albeit on a phone or on a Zoom call or something like that. And human nature is not going to change. So thank you for all of your great insight. I think one thing I'm taking away from this, for all of you that are still very active in the industry, is there's such a giant need for coming together of the clients, whoever your client is, all the layers of the people who work with all the assignees. And thank you, Ronald, for the unsung hero perspective, because that's how I think we felt for a long time. And I just think there's great opportunities, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's not real bright right now, but like I loved your train analogy, Steve, that we don't really see, it's not bright because we see headlights coming at us from another train, and hopefully anyway, so far. So I know we've probably had some questions, or do any of you have questions for the other speakers? Steve.
If I may, I just want to pick up on the two points that Alistair and Ronald mentioned about the unsung heroes. Our association, our organization here in Canada is made up of both the corporate clients and the service partners. And, you know, since the pandemic, I've been hosting meetings just the same way Dom has, you know, is on a periodic basis every few weeks with our members. And from the beginning of the pandemic, I can't tell you the number of stories that the corporate members have been sharing with me about how they simply could not get through the circumstances and the situations. I remember one of our members, she described it as her hair was on fire. That was the phase, as she described it. You know, it was a 911, as we say here. It was a crisis, and she simply could not have gotten through it. And I heard that so many times from the service partners. Yesterday, I hosted a session with some of our corporate members, and I asked them about what did they foresee the services that assignees would need in the future against the backdrop of COVID, against, you know, the restoring that confidence and willingness of people to pick up sticks and go to new destinations. I took two things away from that conversation. One was more personalized service. That is going to be a requirement. Secondly, the companies have to rebuild trust with their employees, because many employees felt, you know, they were getting, and I think you made a really good point, Alistair, about, you know, you can't do a lot of this stuff via email and documents. It's being on the end of a call and providing that assistance directly. That's going to change, you know, that's going to change the commercial aspect of things without doubt. But the companies that want to attract the brightest and the best to their organizations, those are going to be the types of things that differentiate their talent onboarding and their recruitment processes and their retention processes over other companies. As you said at the beginning, Peggy, these are personal opinions, but.
Well, that was great, because I'm just sitting here having a feeling, I'm pretty sure I've been in this industry longer than any of you. And I just had this flashback to the 90s when that's exactly what we did. I mean, those were the things, we didn't have email when I started out in this industry. And so conversations on the phone were how you establish that level of trust. And, you know, with your clients and with the assignee, the end user. So I'm just having this big feeling that the moving forward part has to have all of the innovation and the technology, like what Ronald's doing with his company, and all of the new things that have happened since, you know, decades ago, but without, as we say, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, keeping in mind that people are people, and regardless of your personality type, you know, people need people. So enough said about that, but thank you very much. That was a great sort of tie-in to what everybody has said.
So picking up on this discussion, I think part of our challenge as an industry is we're dealing with a lot of sort of structural limitations and restrictions that we have to deal with, that you know, newer entrants into the markets have, don't have to deal with, right? So they're unencumbered. They can be truly innovative. I mean, Alistair referenced APIs. We are currently working on several API projects with several of the relocation management companies. And the information flow and the volume of data that is involved in that is really built around systems that were created, in the old scenarios, right? Some of it going back to our file management days, right? When and that language is still being used. We're not moving files. We're helping people through a life transition, right? And so that consumes our day because we have to report back to them, rightfully so. They need the data. Their customers want the data. But that sucks up all the remaining energy and bandwidth that we have to to truly be innovative and actually do throw out the baby with the bathwater, but by having a fresh approach to how you do this. None of technology, by the way, also doesn't necessarily have to change the fact that that we have indeed knowledgeable local experts who are empathetic, who understand what's going on and help them, right? The technology really needs to serve as a communication and information sharing mechanism. It's not a replacement of the other. And I think that's perhaps what a lot of DSPs have struggled with, because they came from the people side and thought that technology was sort of impeding on that aspect. It isn't. They can live happily together. But I think that's what we need to figure out. And that's also the message that we need to take back to the market, particularly to corporate, because we are being seen perhaps as too traditional and too inflexible in doing the same thing for 30 years. And I think it's not correct because of what we know on the inside, but we're not getting that out successfully yet. And I think that's to me where the opportunity is, because there've been plenty of entrants that have come into the market with less substance but better polish. They're getting all the attention. And so that just shows you, and you can go back to the politics again to make that analogy as well, why the message is oftentimes more important than what's actually underneath it.
Bingo. Gordon, do you have any more thoughts?
Very nice. Actually, I wanted to, Steve, thank you for bringing that in about the conversations you've been having with the corporates. And Alistair, I just wanted to bring you in on that, because you chaired an RMC EuRA meeting 2 weeks ago, and that pretty well sentiment was shared by that group too, right? That the DSPs have just done amazing work.
Yeah, absolutely. There were probably most of the RMCs in our industry were on the call, and the message was quite consistent throughout. Yeah, very grateful for their supplier network, saying they've done an amazing job and have come up with some fantastic new innovative solutions. I also think the message they portrayed of the pandemic affecting very specific client types. So if they have a broad range of different industry sectors in their client base, then generally they've been okay, because some companies have moved far more people in 2020 than they have done previously. Tech companies and FMCG companies and telecommunications companies, and that increase has been enough for some to just about balance out the decline from some of the other industry sectors. So I thought, yeah, that was really interesting. And the other message I thought, which was great, was you may expect to see a drop just in general globally in assignee and client satisfaction in such a difficult time, because even more so now there are external variables that can potentially go wrong out of everyone's control. But actually the opposite was true, and most companies were saying that they've seen a positive increase in satisfaction levels, because I think people are genuinely really grateful for all the help and support of all the different types of suppliers. They're not just the unsung heroes of the DSP world, but all the others too, providing a fantastic job, extra level of care and attention, and that's been reflected in their scores. So to get an understanding of just what's happening kind of in the industry as a whole, speaking to sort of 20 or so companies and the size of the clients that they're managing, I thought was really interesting. So there are definitely connections and similarities between the message.
Thanks for that.
Thanks,
There's some comments have come through the chat. Thank you very much to everyone. Anita Meyer, thank you, Ronald. As a DSP at heart, representing for a full team of colleagues, I'm grateful for your reference to the relocation field workers out there, and I think there's a theme there. Susan, thank you. Well done, panelists. I enjoyed hearing your perspectives. Alistair, great analogy about DSPs being the unsung heroes. The other key learning 2020 is the importance of collaboration within our industry and communication. Natalie Hilio, what has been difficult for DSPs is that with the close of borders, many relocation and immigration services have stopped. Budgets have been frozen. In the advisory sector, we still have revenues, but it dropped for immigration and relo, and that's obviously a very good point. And Sabrina echoes something that I think, Ronald, you were saying. Tech for internal use to make processes faster is great, but externally, a signy personal touch is best. Peggy, back to what you were saying earlier. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box. Peggy, back to you. Oh, Gordon. Hello.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point that all this disruption going on does create opportunities. I sometimes think back to when I set up a relocation business. It was a relatively new industry. Finding opportunities was relatively easy because we had a new message. And of course, over the last 20 years, it's become increasingly difficult, and pressure on fees, pressure on costs. I just wonder if we will see more opportunities for innovation coming out of these disruptors that are around us. We've touched on it in terms of the acceleration of technology. But if I were a DSP business at the moment, I guess I would be thinking, where are these opportunities? The way I've traditionally worked with an RMC and a corporate over there, and I deal with certain types of move at the higher end. Is there an opportunity for my relationships to be different? Is there an opportunity to deliver services to more people because I can use technology? And I absolutely take the point about personal service, but I think to actually broaden the marketplace in which we operate, there must be opportunities in using the technology that's been so successful in keeping us in business over the past year, to actually rethink the way we deliver and the way we sell. So yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm painting this dark scenario. I'm feeling a bit dark just because I'm British today. We've been kicked out of Europe, and I may be about to be kicked out of Britain as well. So you have to excuse me, but no, in all seriousness, I do feel opportunities must be in there with all that disruption and with the kind of technology that we've proved can be so effective.
Gordon, I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think you really hit kind of a point that encapsulates or summarizes everything that we've said. I just wrote down a few words: trust, communication, opportunities, collaboration, new messaging, and flexibility. And I think that the flexibility part, this is what I've always said, we're nimble as an industry. Why we're good is because we do deal with lots of different people with different needs. So there are whole groups of people who maybe don't want any of the personal interaction at all. And there might, in my opinion, hopefully still be people who want the personal interaction. So that's the flexibility and sort of, I used to say, turning on a dime, just a kind of being nimble and being able to change and not just being stuck. All of you have touched on the past and the things that we did back then that we don't need to be doing now, but finding, the innovative part for me is about what all of you have said, is finding, having enough in your toolbox to know where to plug in when you need to, and figuring out that message. So
yeah.
Thank you. I really agree. There's not pessimism. I really hear more optimism than pessimism from all of you. So thank you for that.
Tracy Couchman's put a good point in the box. Gordon, enlarging the clientele to short-term contractors and students and to others that are not expats. And just to follow up on that, on our YouTube channel, there's a session, one of these briefings called Diversification in Mobility. And Isabel Cudell talks very eloquently about how back 10 years ago, after the financial shock of the 2008 crash, she moved into exactly that. She pivoted her company to support students and captured a completely new clientele. So very good point. And also just while I'm talking about Tracy, Steve, earlier you were talking about working from anywhere and how this is going to shift perceptions in mobility. Tracy led a terrific session in our fall forum, along with Lucy Foster, who's also on this call, about exactly that on virtual assignments. So, please go back to the YouTube channel and take a look. Peggy, back to you.
Well, I think I've probably said enough. I guess I need to just say one more time or 10 more times. Thank you very much to Dom for keeping us all together. I mean, speaking about, changes and I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of getting sick of just seeing all your faces on Zoom. So hopefully soon we can get together in person. But yeah, I know, cross everything you have that is crossable. So thank you so much. I think we had a nice mix of coming from different parts of the world. And I think we accomplished, I hope we did, what we wanted to. It's just every session that we've had, I think, has opened up an avenue for another briefing. So don't be thinking you're going to have a holiday anytime soon, Dom. Just, this is what's keeping us all together, and it's what's really important in the industry. And we know that. So thank you to everybody. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Just from Andrea Shermer, thanks to everybody for putting the last year and its experiences into a nutshell. A lot of useful ideas and opinions that help for sure to develop new ideas and to develop the processes started, especially in terms of how to service the assignee and the company's partners. Really informative. I would just like to thank you all, Peggy, Steve, Ronald, Alistair, Gordon, as ever, for your support. It's great that you take the time to do this, and thank you to everybody who's attended as well. I think I echo what Peggy said, it keeps us all together. The next briefing will actually be the opportunity to talk to the board. We are going to open up our Christmas board huddle to the EuRA membership. So that will be a week on Tuesday, which is the 22nd, I think, of December. To all of you, thank you, Susan. Happy and safe holidays to everybody. What else can I say? Let's go forward into 2021 with hope and optimism. And thank you, Peggy, for moderating. I'll leave that to you.
Well, I didn't do much. Thank you to all of you. Thanks very much. Have a great holiday season, everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody. And to everybody attending, we really, really, really hope to see you in 2020.
Cheers. Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Be safe.
Bye.
Be happy. Be well.
Stay safe. Stay well.